At dinner, Mom slid a white envelope across the table to my sister. $150,000 for her new house. Dad didn't hesitate. He just looked at me and said, "You're the failure. We invest in winners. The winners?" Room went silent. Forks frozen. Smiles cracked. I didn't cry. I just folded my napkin, walked out, and never looked back. That night, I didn't beg for love or fairness. I started something they'd never see coming. 2 years later, my sister drove past my property, slammed on the brakes, and screamed into the phone, "Dad, you need to come here now." When I was 12, I built a suspension bridge out of wire and drinking straws for the state science fair. It held the weight of a full textbook. I won first place. I still remember standing on that gym stage, scanning the crowd for my parents' 2 empty seats in the front row. They were in Denver that weekend, cheering for my sister at her beauty pageant. That night, I brought the medal home, proud and glowing. Dad glanced at it once and turned up the TV. "Strange girl," he muttered. "What kind of daughter plays with machines?" Mom didn't answer. She just stroked Jessica's hair while my sister showed off her Little Miss Sunshine trophy under the living room lights. That moment stuck like a splinter. It wasn't the words. It was the quiet after them. The quiet where love should have been. As I grew up, I learned that love in my family came with receipts. Every favor, every gift, every smile, it all depended on whether you made them look good. Jessica was their miracle child, the one who got the easy praise, the second chances, the excuses. I was the backup plan, the strong one, the one who didn't need anything. I worked nights to pay for college. They paid Jessica's full tuition without blinking. I graduated with honors, found my first job as a structural engineer, and sent them photos of my projects, bridges, apartment buildings, steel frames cutting into the sky. The only reply I got from Dad was, "You still renting?" Every phone call became a report card on my stability, Jessica's promotion, Jessica's engagement, Jessica's new car. They didn't ask how I was. They just measured me against her shadow. Still, I kept hoping that one day they'd see me as more than a failed investment. That hope finally cracked the night of the dinner when Dad said, "We invest in winners." Something inside me shut off. I stopped chasing their approval. I stopped explaining myself, and I started learning the difference between silence that breaks you and silence that saves you. So I packed up, left Colorado Springs, and headed back to Denver. No calls, no tears, just the road, the hum of the tires, and a promise to myself if they wouldn't see my worth, I'd build it, brick by brick, until the whole world could. Losing my family was one kind of silence. Losing my job was another. It happened on a gray March morning, the kind where even the air feels tired. The company had been struggling for months, but I kept convincing myself I was safe. I worked hard, hit deadlines, stayed late. But when the director read out the layoff list, my name sat right there in the middle, clean, final, unarguable. I walked out into the snow with the termination letter crushed in my hand. The cold hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the traffic, wondering how many times in life you can rebuild from zero. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the faint reflection of city lights on the window. The silence inside wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, the kind that makes every sound echo too loud. I picked up my phone, opened the Bennett family group chat, and saw there, latest photo, Jessica standing in front of her new house, champagne in hand, our parents beside her smiling like they'd just won the lottery. The caption read, "So proud of our youngest daughter." I stared at it for a long time before typing one last message. "Thank you for teaching me to stand on my own, even in the cruelest way possible." I hit send. Then I blocked their numbers, deleted the chat, and sat there while the screen went black. For the first time there was no audience, no expectations, just me. The fear came first. What if I fail? Again? But what if they were right? But underneath the fear, something small stirred. Freedom. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I didn't have a job, and I didn't have a plan, but I had a choice. I could either spend my days proving them wrong, or I could build a life that made their opinions irrelevant. I made coffee, opened my sketchbook, and drew a simple line, just the outline of a small house. I didn't know it then, but that line would become the first step of everything that came after the first few weeks after I lost. My jaw blurred together, coffee gone, cold rejection emails piling up, and a quiet that made the refrigerator hum. Sound like company. I applied everywhere, from small construction firms to drafting studios, but the whole city felt frozen. Denver was still limping out of the recession, and no one was hiring. One afternoon, I found myself in a small cafe called Harlan's Corner. The place looked tired, dim lights, chipped furniture, and a smell of burnt espresso that lingered like regret. I sat at the back with my laptop half working, half wondering how much longer I could pretend I was fine. That's when the owner, a man in his 60s with silver hair and paint-stained hands, came over. "You're Wendy Bennett, right?" "The engineer." I looked up, startled. "Used to," I said. He smiled. "Used to, I could use someone like you. The cafe is falling apart, and I've got about bucks left to fix it. Interested?" Rent. But something in his tone, earnest, trusting, made me nod. "Yeah, I'm interested." For the next few weeks, I practically lived there. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, rewired light fixtures, and designed a new layout that made the tiny cafe feel twice its size. I used reclaimed wood. For the counter, hung a few pendant lights and covered one wall with mirrors to pull in more light. When it was finished, Harlan stood in the middle of the room, eyes glistening. "It feels alive again," he said softly. "You've got magic in your hands, kid." A week later, a local magazine ran a small feature titled "A Forgotten Cafe," brought back to life by local engineer. It had one photo of me standing behind the counter paint on my jeans, a tired but proud smile on my face. The next morning, my inbox exploded. People were asking if I could help redesign their small businesses, old shops, even homes. I didn't have a company, just a sketchbook and a few tools, but I said yes. One of the jobs took me to gold. In a quiet town west of Denver to renovate an old brick house for a retired veteran. The moment I arrived, I met the man inspecting the foundation, a tall, broad-shouldered engineer named Ethan Walker. His sleeves were rolled up, arms dusted with cement, eyes calm, gray like early winter. "You're the designer?" he asked. I nodded. "And you're the one making sure it doesn't collapse." He chuckled. "Then we'll get along fine." We did more than that. Ethan was steady, deliberate, patient, the kind of man who made silence feel safe. We worked side by side for weeks, measuring beams, debating layouts, sketching on scraps of paper. Sometimes we didn't talk for hours, just worked in quiet rhythm. One day, while I was crouched on the floor, redrawing a design, he handed me a water bottle. You forget the world when you work, he said. I smiled without looking. That's the point. He hesitated, then said, you look at a house like it has, soul. I laughed softly. But later that night, lying in bed, those words echoed. In my head, when the project ended, Ethan invited me to dinner at a small restaurant near Sloan's Lake. Over warm bread and red wine, we talked not just about buildings, but about fear failure and the strange peace of starting over. I told him about losing my job, about walking away from my family. He didn't pity me. He just said, you don't need their approval, Wendy. You've already built something they can't touch. It was the first time in years someone saw me. Not the version my family dismissed, but the woman I'd fought to become. A few weeks later, he called out of nowhere. I have a crazy idea, he said. Do you ever thought about designing a home that generates its own energy? A sustainable model, small, simple, self-sufficient. I froze. That was the dream I'd buried long ago, the one Dad had called too risky. Yeah, I said I have, and maybe it's time, he replied. We called it the Eco Home Project. Months later, we found a small plot of land in Oregon, 5 acres, overlooking the ocean. The owner, George, was an older man with kind eyes and a quiet sadness. I planned to build a home here once, he said, but my wife passed before I could. When I told him our plan, he nodded slowly. $75,000, he said. I'm lowering the price. You too will make it something worth living in. Ethan covered the rest of the cost I couldn't afford. No strings, he said. Just partnership. We set up a tent near the clearing where the pines whispered, and the ocean wind carried the scent of salt and rain. Every morning we brewed coffee on a portable stove, then worked until our hands blistered. We cut grass, cleared stones, and built the foundation by hand. I named it Evergreen Cabin. 600 square FT, solar panels, rainwater system, handcrafted wood from a dismantled barn. Everything sustainable, everything built from what the world discarded, just like me. Some days I wanted to quit. My body ached, my fingers cracked from cold. But every night, sitting by the fire, I looked at the rising frame and thought, this is what it feels like to rebuild yourself. By month 10, the cabin stood complete, pale. Wood-wide windows and a porch that opened toward the sea. When the sunlight hit it just right, it glowed like it had its own heartbeat. I took a single photo, posted it online with a caption, built this myself. By morning, the post had gone viral. People wrote, you made me believe again. You turned pain into something beautiful. For the first time, the world saw me the way I always hoped my parents would. It was a quiet May morning, soft sun, through the trees, lavender blooming. Along the porch when I heard the sound of tires screeching on gravel, a silver BMW stopped just short of the gate. The door flew open, and there she was. The first time, I saw a flicker of something in my father's eyes, not anger, not pride, shame. Did you do all this for revenge? He asked finally. I shook my head. Revenge would mean I still care what you think. I don't. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the lavender scent between us. Jessica stood off to the side, watching with tears in her eyes. Dad's shoulders dropped. His voice was when he said we were wrong. Mom began to cry quietly into her hands. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. I don't need to forgive you to be free, I said softly. I already am. They left soon after. The SUV disappeared down the gravel road, and the forest grew still again. I stood on the porch, heart pounding, not from anger, but from release. Ethan draped his arm around me. You okay? I looked out toward the trees where the light shifted golden across the cabin walls. For the first time, I said completely, A week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived, no return address, just my name, in my father's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter and a photo of our old house with a for sale sign out front. His words were unsteady. We loved. You were in the wrong way. Through fear, through comparison. We're starting over, and for the first time, we are proud of you. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. I just walked outside where the air smelled of pine and rain and planted a young tree near the porch. A new beginning rooted in peace. Ethan stepped beside me, holding a small walnut box he'd carved from the first tree we cut for the cabin. Inside was a simple wooden ring. Wendy Bennett, he said quietly, will you keep building with me? I laughed through tears. Only if we draw the blueprint together. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the forest, I wrote one final line in my journal. They gave her $150,000. They gave me silence, but silence became my foundation. The wind moved through the trees like a promise. Sometimes, revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about letting them see you happy without needing their approval. My parents gave me silence, but that silence taught me everything about strength, boundaries, and peace. If you've ever been told you'll never make it, I hope my story reminds you that you can build a life from the ground up, one that no one can take away. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And if this story hit home for you, hit subscribe, share it, and stay for the next one. You're not alone.